Tier 1, Chapter 6. In this chapter, we're going to get to know two characters, Nick and Sherry. You've already been introduced to Sherry, but Nick is new, and he's important, so pay attention.
Chapter 6. I walk into the Mainburg Campus Center on time. Normally this reception area is buzzing, but tonight it's quiet and still. The sound of my shoes against the tile echoes around me. This place always feels somewhat sterile, but this evening it seems especially hygienic. I guess I can't expect anything more when geneticists are in charge of building design. The entire campus is entirely utilitarian, which I appreciate, but also helps me resonate with our predecessors' obsession with carpet and upholstered chairs. I should have asked Sherry where we were meeting specifically, but assume it will be in one of the smaller rooms next to the main auditorium. I head that direction and begin peeking through windows. A small group of people sits huddled around a table in one of the classrooms. Though I can only see the backs of their heads, I would recognize that short brunette bob anywhere. My hand closes around the circular handle and the door swings open. All eyes turn toward me. Finding Sherry's face, I smile and make my way to an available chair across from her. Gratefully, my footsteps don't sound nearly as abrasive in this space. And here I thought I was on time. You are all overachievers, I say jokingly, and hear a few chuckles in response. We had a couple of things to discuss before you arrived, a woman responds, her voice high and clear. She must be the group leader. Though I have no previous experience with these committees, I immediately wonder what they would need to discuss without me being present. I let the thought slide, taking my seat. Kate, my name is Grace, and I am here to give assignments for the ceremony this year. Grace looks to be about my age, perhaps a little older. My eyes are drawn immediately to her jet black hair twisted up in a tight bun. Her every movement exudes professionalism and poise. Nodding, I open my tablet and steal a glance around the table at the rest of the group. The man across from me looks disturbingly familiar. He is young, probably early 20s at most. How would I know him? My brain starts scanning through all of the potential options, trying to puzzle it out. Kate, does that work for you? Grace asks. Could you repeat that? My mind was distracted. I flush, whipping my head to attention, focusing again on Grace. Of course. I was asking if you would be willing to work with Nick on introductions this year. Since you both have some relationships with the candidates transitioning, we thought it would be comforting for them to see you up there. It should be easier to write the introductions with some personal knowledge of them anyway. She smiles at me, but it isn't a warm expression, rather an assiduous one. I don't dare dissent, despite my hesitations. That makes sense, I respond meekly. I don't know who Nick is, but I'm happy to help. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself? Grace commands, gesturing to the man I had previously noticed. He shoots out a hand, and I reach across to shake it. Hey, I think we've worked at Washington Park together a couple of times, but haven't officially met. Though I did smack into you by the washroom one time. He smiles, and it seems to envelop his entire face. Of course. The moment comes rushing back to me, causing my extremities to tingle, going slightly numb. It's funny, when I sat down, I stammer. I thought you looked familiar, but I must have blocked that awkward experience out. I didn't recognize you, all cleaned up and out of context, I explain. I'll try not to be offended that I didn't make an impression, he teases. My cheeks burn and I change the subject. I hope you don't mind me asking, but aren't you a little young to be a health consultant? Everyone around the table laughs, making me question whether I have missed something. Suddenly, becoming aware that my hand is still in his, I quickly release it, blinking rapidly. I don't mind at all, he replies, grinning, his eyes rich with youthful energy. I am a little young, definitely, but I was fast-tracked through a lot of my conditioning because my results were abnormal. I'm just happy to be serving here instead of taking more classes. Interesting. I didn't even know that was possible to such an extent. Is that what it will look like for Bentley? When Dr. Harmon mentioned accelerating, I was thinking by a year or two. Maybe this guy is an extreme outlier? He does have incredible skin and bone structure, above average musculature, thick, wavy hair. Probably an anomaly. I clear my throat. That's impressive. I'm surprised our paths haven't crossed more at Washington Park. How long have you been stationed there? I ask. Not long. My first day was actually just a couple of weeks ago. I am still fully riding the learning curve. He smiles, turning his attention back to Grace. Why don't I go with Kate to the office so we can look over the files for the ceremony? Does that work? That would be great, Nick. Thank you for both being here. Grace, just to clarify, I stall. Nick and I will be presenting the candidates at the ceremony, but what specifically should we focus on in our introductions? I haven't attended one of those in years, so I want to make sure that we are on the right track. Oh, Nick has all of the information. I will let him give you the checklist. Any other questions before you go? She looks at me unblinking, another smile not quite reaching her eyes. No, that's great. Thanks so much. I look over at Sherry questioningly as I shuffle my tablet into my bag. Grace is already starting in on seating logistics with the others. Sherry waves me off. Why did I need to attend this meeting if I would be leaving immediately to receive my instructions from Nick? Couldn't we have met separately and he could have explained everything? I'm hopeful that Sherry will call me after training and we can talk about it then. I hurriedly follow Nick out of the room and down the hall. Though I pass this way regularly, I have never actually entered the office. I watch him rummage in his pocket for a key and smoothly insert it into the lock. His head nearly reaches the top of the doorframe, a detail I missed during our initial harried interaction. I want to ask him more about his conditioning, but maybe that would be weird. I resolve to simply receive my instructions tonight and then finish my portion at home. There will really be no need for me to interact much with him in the future anyway. Though, I guess that may be an argument for being willing to make a fool of myself. Nick sits down at the desk and pulls up the display. All 6 candidates appear in front of us. I immediately recognize Cassidy and Max, another candidate I worked with earlier in the year. Not knowing the others, I assume Nick must have some connection. All right, why don't you show me the checklist and we can determine which candidates should be assigned to each of us. I can put something together at home. Training starts in 10 minutes, I say abruptly. Nick looks at me amused. Oh, no, this will be in place of training tonight. Grace already let our groups know that we won't be available. We will actually be writing these intros together, he says nonchalantly as he stretches back in the chair, reminding me of a cat, lazily extending after a nap. We all thought that might make them more cohesive and consistent. I'm sorry you weren't there when we were discussing this. I think Grace felt like I needed some extra instructions since I'm completely new to all of this, but I hope it didn't make you feel excluded. No, I did find it a little odd that everyone was there before me, but I am not overly concerned about it. If we are doing this instead of training, though, I need to quickly message my pair. I told him I would save him a seat. Do you mind? Of course. Go ahead. I'll pull up the focus list while you do that. His fingers deftly begin scrolling through the files on the tablet. I step into the hall, noticing people beginning to trickle in through the front doors. Eric may be a few minutes late since he has to get the boys settled. Tal's mentor, Steven, always watches them for us when we have training, but sometimes the boys still insist on me or Eric reading them stories before we leave. I quietly speak into my sensor. For Eric, hey, this meeting is actually taking the place of training, so I won't be able to save you a seat. So sorry. Hope the boys aren't being too clingy. Let me know what I missed. Love you. I wait to confirm that it's sent, then re-enter the room. Nick has pulled up the document on the display and is scrutinizing what seems to be a personal message when I walk back in. He closes his window, turning toward me. All good? He asks cheerily. I hope so. We have 2 boys, so sometimes getting both of us to training is a little tricky. I see a thought flicker across Nick's face, but then he's back to his perky self. That must be tough. I'll avoid taking up too much of your time so you can get home, he says. My tablet clatters on the table's smooth wooden surface as I set it down. Nick, can you tell me more about how you were fast-tracked? I've never heard of that happening. We recently had our annual scans, and my almost 8-year-old son showed some results that might require some acceleration. It makes me nervous. I have always been taught that we need certain experiences over a specific amount of time for our brains to really develop, for us to truly embrace the values needed to fulfill all that is required of us in Tier 1. Aren't you worried that you will somehow have problems later on? Or burn out? I don't mean to pry, but I'm extremely curious. Being Tier 1 is a big risk with high reward, not only for the individual, but for society as well. Years ago, when we split to a tier system, it wasn't because the system was ideal, but because it was necessary. The world population only had so many resources, and a decision had to be made on how to allocate those in the best possible way for our survival. Tier 1 was created to ensure that survival. Those who had the highest chance of life and successful procreation were given top priority to guarantee that the next generation would be as genetically viable as possible. It was thought that a group with clean DNA and consistent positive social input could produce generations of stable individuals who could then learn, discover, and serve society as it healed. And it's working. Here we are, almost 275 years since the crisis, and all we have seen is success. Our average lifespan has increased by almost 20 years. Infant mortality is less than 5%, and we have significantly reduced suffering during old age. Why would we, all of a sudden, alter a proven system? Nick rolls back on his chair and turns toward me. He isn't grinning as widely anymore. It's actually terrifying, he says quietly. When I was younger, my parents were informed that my responses to conditioning were far beyond age level. They knew that, genetically, I was completely clean. I mean, no markers or variations besides something as benign as motion sickness. I cough. He pauses. I'm sorry, Well, nobody with motion sickness would describe it as being benign, I explain. Go on. Sorry, that was completely involuntary. Nick laughs. I guess mine isn't that severe. He gives me a mock disapproving look. Before I was so rudely interrupted, I was saying that besides the completely debilitating motion sickness that I deal with, I am genetically perfect. He holds up his hands. I know, it sounds pretentious, but that's what they tell me. After my conditioning results were abnormal, our local committee, of which Grace is a member, petitioned to the regional and then territorial leaders at Berg to push me forward. As far as I know, this hasn't happened in the past, but I guess there are a couple of other people around the region who are in my same situation. All of them men. So, long story short, yes, I am scared. I don't know what to expect, and I don't think anyone else does either. But I was plateauing in conditioning. It all just made sense. I meant what I said back there. I am really glad to be actually contributing to the world, and I guess I hope that it will all work out the way Berg expects it to. He lifts his arms behind his head again and leans back. I try to stay focused on his face. Any other questions before we actually get to work? Home to your children, remember? He teases. Yes, sorry. My curiosity got the better of me. No more distractions. I pick up my tablet and turn on the display when I feel his hand brush my arm. I think curiosity is a good thing. Ask me anything, anytime. He's looking at me intently. It feels strangely intimate, and I pull back. Thanks. I pull my hair up and words begin to awkwardly tumble from my mouth. Should we start with Cassidy? She is the one I know best, unless you have someone you'd like to discuss. I assume you know some of the others. I can feel my face flushing. Pull it together, Kate. It's been so long since I talked extensively with any man besides Eric. It really doesn't help that Nick is so physically appealing. Despite the fact that I am paired and in every way fulfilled, my body and mind can't help but respond to the perfect symmetry of his face, his angular jaw, and his broad shoulders. I am tempted to reach out and trace those lines, not because I want to be with him, but because I want to make sure that he's real. I have spent a lot of time studying physical attractiveness as part of my health training. The history of it is fascinating. It has changed so much over the course of human history, especially for women, from buxom to stick thin, back to curvy and then muscular. Usually society favors signs of health, but with the influx of technology before and during the crisis, girls and boys were inundated with unrealistic images that exaggerated certain characteristics before they fully matured physically or mentally. Large-breasted women with tiny hips and waists, faces coated in products to make people look flushed and youthful, men with arms and chests so large that their arms couldn't even rest against their sides naturally, hair treated with chemicals to make it look shiny, and the list goes on. It became impossible for people to actually gauge true attractiveness, and people were constantly stressed about being appealing to others. They mutilated their bodies in search of an ideal that didn't exist, which, ironically, made their genes less viable. Our society now values true health and viability. We didn't have time or resources after the crisis to fake it, and to do so now would be completely socially unacceptable. In my position, I must be able to assess a patient's outward appearance, their skin elasticity and pallor, muscle tone, eye clarity, bone structure. It isn't just an indication of genetic potential, but also of their general nutrition and physical fitness. If someone were to artificially boost their performance or appearance during those appointments, how would it serve them? They would only be hurting their future possibilities. Not worth it. I give myself some credit. It is my responsibility to notice people. Of course I would notice Nick. Sure, let's start with Cassidy, Nick says. The rest of the meeting is all business. Nick explains how the goal of the introduction is twofold. We need to provide information that will promote acceptance within Tier 1 while also building up self-confidence in the candidate. Acceptance into a group requires both the existing members of the group and the new addition to accept the relationship inherently. We discuss different ideas on how to accomplish this and make good progress with a few of the candidates. Nick is extremely thoughtful, and I am surprised by the depth of his insight at such a young age. He is in the middle of another thought when I realize I desperately have to use the restroom. I glance down at my sensor and see that it is almost 9 p.m. Training must have ended an hour ago. I also see that I have 5 messages from Eric. Nick notices that I am distracted and pauses. I had no idea how late it was. I really need to get home to my family. I'm so sorry to cut you off. I hurriedly stand up and slip my tablet into my bag. Do you think we can finish up in one more meeting next week sometime? Definitely. I will message you to set that up. Thanks, Kate. It was great to meet you. You too. I rush out and quickly head to the car. I can't believe I stayed so late. Eric must be worried. I send him a quick note letting him know I am on my way home. In the car, I quickly call Sherry. I only have 5 minutes before I get home, so hopefully she is available. Her face comes into view. Took you long enough? Were the kids up when you got home? I am barely on my way home. Wait, what? I thought you were only meeting during training. What happened? I don't know. We were passing ideas back and forth, and the next thing I knew, it was 9 o'clock. I am almost home, so I just wanted to call and say that was a really weird initial meeting. Why did they even have me come? I could have just met with Nick and received instructions there. I felt really out of place. I know. It was strange. Grace is interesting. I think she just really likes to see everything organized. She wanted all of our faces in the same room. Thanks for hanging in there. I really think you will do great. And Nick? Right? She gives me a knowing look and an eyebrow raise. I laugh. I'm glad I'm not the only one who noticed, I admit, relieved. I'm actually really excited. Sherry laughs. Not about Nick, I scoff, about the ceremony. I haven't gotten up in front of people in a long time, but this is important. Helping these candidates feel at home in Tier 1 is so crucial to their success. Sherry winks conspiratorially, and I roll my eyes, glancing out the window. I'm pulling in now. Sorry for such a short call. Have a great night, Kate. We can talk more in depth at our next session. Friday, right? See you then. Enjoy your 8 hours. I wink, and she is gone.